Olivia Fairchild clutched her shawl tighter around her shoulders as the bitter wind whipped across the Montana plains, her entire life reduced to a single devastating transaction. A sack of flour, her stepfather had bellowed through yellowed teeth, shoving her toward the gaunt-faced stranger. "She ain't worth more than that, and I'm being generous." It was 1878, and the harshness of winter had descended upon Silver Peak, Montana, with unforgiving fury. 3 consecutive seasons of failed crops had left many families desperate, but none quite as desperate as the household Olivia had endured since her mother's passing 2 years prior. Her stepfather, Walter Hargrove, had shown his true nature after her mother's death: cruel, calculating, and perpetually drunk. When the opportunity arose to trade his unwanted stepdaughter to a passing drifter for provisions, he hadn't hesitated. Olivia stood trembling on the weathered porch of the only home she'd ever known, watching as the stranger loaded the flour into his wagon. He was a rough-looking man of about 40, with a scar that twisted his mouth into a permanent sneer. His eyes raked over her figure in a way that made her stomach turn. "Get in the wagon, girl," the man growled. "Name's Thorne. You belong to me now." Her stepfather had already retreated inside, the door slamming behind him with finality. Olivia glanced at the endless expanse of prairie stretching beyond the homestead, knowing she had nowhere to run. With leaden feet, she climbed onto the wagon bench. They'd traveled less than 5 miles when Thorne's true intentions became clear. His hand landed heavily on her knee, sliding upward. "Been a long time since I had me a woman," he muttered, alcohol heavy on his breath. "And never one so young and pretty." Olivia jerked away, panic rising. "Please!" The crack of a rifle shot split the air, causing the horses to rear. Thorne's head snapped up, his hand moving instinctively to the pistol at his hip. A voice, deep and steady, called out from a copse of trees to their right. "Take your hand off that gun unless you're keen to lose it." A tall figure emerged from the shadows, rifle leveled steadily at Thorne's chest. The man was young, perhaps 25, with sun-bronzed skin and piercing blue eyes beneath the brim of his worn Stetson. His posture spoke of complete confidence, a man comfortable with the weapon in his hands. "This ain't your concern, cowboy," Thorne spat. "The girl's mine." Paid fair and square for her, the stranger's eyes narrowed. A human being isn't property to be bought or sold. He shifted his attention briefly to Olivia, taking in her terrified expression and the red marks on her wrist where Thorne had grabbed her. "Madam, are you with this man by choice?" Olivia's throat constricted with fear, but she managed to shake her head. "That's all I needed to know." The cowboy's focus returned to Thorne. "You've got 2 choices. Ride away now without the lady or try your luck against this rifle." Thorne's face contorted with rage. "You think I'm afraid of you, boy?" His hand inched toward his gun. The rifle cracked again, and dirt exploded just inches from Thorne's boot. "That was your warning shot," the cowboy said calmly. "Won't be another." A tense silence stretched between them, broken only by the nervous stamping of the horses. Finally, Thorne spat on the ground. "She ain't worth the trouble." He fixed Olivia with a venomous glare. "Get off my wagon." Olivia scrambled down, nearly falling in her haste. Thorne snapped the reins and the wagon lurched forward, leaving her standing in the middle of the dirt road, shaking uncontrollably. The cowboy lowered his rifle and approached slowly, keeping a respectful distance. "Are you hurt, miss?" "No," Olivia managed, though her voice trembled. "Thank you for stopping him." He nodded, studying her with concern. "I'm Nathan Addison. Most folks call me Nate." "Olivia Fairchild," she replied automatically, years of her mother's lessons in politeness surfacing even in this bizarre circumstance. Miss Fairchild, if you don't mind my asking, what exactly happened back there? Shame washed over her. How could she possibly explain? My stepfather traded me to that man for a sack of flour. Nathan's expression darkened. He what? Tears spilled down Olivia's cheeks. We're behind on taxes. The crops failed again this year, he said. He said I was just another mouth to feed. That's not something a man does, Nathan said, his jaw tight with controlled anger. Not to his own kin, not to anyone. He glanced at the sun, already dipping toward the horizon. Night's coming on. You have somewhere safe to go. Olivia's silence was answer enough. Nathan considered her for a moment. My ranch is about 3 miles west of here. My sister Alina lives there too. You'd be safe with us until you figure out your next steps. Olivia hesitated. This man had saved her, true, but following a stranger to his isolated ranch wasn't without risk. Yet what choice did she have? Return to a stepfather who had sold her like livestock. Try to make it to Silver Peak on foot with night approaching and no money to her name. Nathan seemed to sense her conflict. I understand your caution, Miss Fairchild. If you prefer, I can escort you to town instead. Silver Peak's about 12 miles south. There's a decent boarding house run by Mrs. Sullivan. She might have work for you. His consideration of her comfort surprised her. Your ranch, if your offer still stands. I don't have money for a boarding house. Nathan nodded. The offer stands. He gestured to his horse, a magnificent chestnut quarter horse grazing nearby. Rusty can carry us both for 3 miles. The ride to Nathan's ranch was mostly silent. Olivia sat stiffly in front of him, acutely aware of his arms on either side of her holding the reins, his chest a solid presence at her back. Her mind raced with the day's events, each thought more overwhelming than the last. In the span of hours, she had been traded away, nearly assaulted, rescued by a stranger, and now found herself heading toward an unknown future. The landscape opened up as they crested a small rise, revealing a modest but well-maintained ranch spread across a protected valley. A 2-story house built of sturdy logs stood as its center, with several outbuildings and corrals surrounding it. Smoke curled invitingly from the chimney. It's not much, Nathan said, but it's home. It's beautiful, Olivia replied honestly. After the decrepit cabin she'd shared with her stepfather, Nathan's ranch looked like paradise. As they approached the house, a woman emerged onto the porch, wiping her hands on an apron. She was younger than Olivia had expected, perhaps 20, with the same striking blue eyes as Nathan. Nate. She called. You're back early, and with company. Nathan dismounted first, then offered his hand to help Olivia down. Alina, this is Miss Olivia Fairchild. She's in need of shelter for a while. Miss Fairchild, my sister Alina. Alina's warm smile instantly put Olivia at ease. Any friend of Nate's is welcome here. Come in out of the cold, supper's nearly ready. The interior of the ranch house was simple but comfortable, with handcrafted furniture and colorful quilts adding warmth to the space. The aroma of stew simmering over the fire made Olivia's stomach growl loudly, reminding her she hadn't eaten since a meager breakfast of watery porridge. Sounds like we got you here just in time, Alina said kindly, gesturing for Olivia to sit at the table. Let me fetch you a bowl. While Alina served the meal, Nathan took Olivia's shawl and the small bundle of possessions she'd managed to grab before being forced from her home. His eyes widened slightly at how little she had: just a spare dress, a hairbrush that had been her mother's, and a small book of poetry. Alina can lend you anything else you need, he said quietly. Over dinner, Nathan explained to his sister a simplified version of how he'd encountered Olivia, sparing her the humiliating details of being traded for flour. Alina's expression grew increasingly concerned. "You'll stay with us as long as you need," she declared when he finished. "The spare room upstairs is yours." "I can't accept charity," Olivia protested weakly. "I can work. I know how to cook and clean, and I'm good with a needle." "We could use the help," Nathan admitted. "Winter's coming and there's plenty to do before the snow flies. But that's a conversation for tomorrow. Tonight you rest." That night, lying in an actual bed with clean sheets for the first time in months, Olivia stared at the ceiling, trying to process everything that had happened. Her life had been uprooted entirely, yet somehow she felt safer than she had in years. The crushing weight of living under her stepfather's volatile temper was gone. For the first time since her mother died, she allowed herself to hope. Morning brought soft golden light streaming through the window and the distant sounds of a working ranch coming to life. Olivia dressed quickly in her spare dress, embarrassed by how worn and patched it was, and made her way downstairs. The main room was empty, but a pot of coffee simmered on the stove, and a note in neat handwriting sat on the table. "Miss Fairchild, help yourself to breakfast. Aliner's gone to check the chicken coop and I'm out with the horses. Make yourself at home. Nathan." The simple domesticity of it, breakfast waiting, people going about their morning chores, brought a lump to Olivia's throat. She found fresh bread, preserves, and eggs, and by the time Aliner returned with a basket of eggs, Olivia had breakfast prepared and the kitchen tidied. "You didn't have to do this," Aliner said, though her pleased expression belied her words. "I want to earn my keep," Olivia insisted. "It's the least I can do after your kindness." Aliner's smile faded slightly. "Nate told me everything last night after you went to bed. About how your stepfather treated you." Olivia's cheeks burned with shame. "I'm sorry you had to hear about that." "Don't be," Aliner said firmly. "The shame isn't yours to carry. Some folks in this world don't deserve the title of family. Nate and I know a thing or two about that." Before Olivia could ask what she meant, the door opened and Nathan entered, bringing with him the scent of horses and fresh air. His hair was slightly damp with sweat, his shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal muscular forearms. He stopped short at the sight of the prepared breakfast. "You didn't have to cook, Miss Fairchild." "Olivia, please," she corrected gently. "And I wanted to." Something in Nathan's expression softened. "Olivia, then, thank you." Over breakfast they discussed the arrangement. The Addison ranch was prosperous by local standards, but not so large that they could afford hired help. Nathan managed most of the outdoor work himself, with occasional assistance from neighboring ranchers during busy seasons. Aliner handled the household and garden, plus the chickens and 2 milk cows. With winter approaching and supplies needing to be preserved for the cold months ahead, an extra pair of hands would be genuinely helpful. "We can't offer much in wages," Nathan explained, "but you'll have room and board, and we'll set aside a small amount each month for you." "That's more than fair," Olivia said, grateful for any opportunity that kept her from returning to her stepfather or facing life on the streets of Silver Peak. "Good, then that's settled," Aliner said with satisfaction. "Now, if you're to stay through winter, we'd best get you some proper clothes. I think we're close enough in size that my things will do until we can get to town." The days fell into a comfortable rhythm. Olivia worked alongside Aliner, learning the specifics of running the Addison household. Unlike the dreary drudgery of chores at her stepfather's cabin, here the work felt purposeful and appreciated. Each evening, the three of them would gather for dinner, sharing the events of their day. Sometimes Nathan would read aloud from one of the few books they owned, his deep voice bringing the words to life in a way Olivia had never experienced. As the weeks passed, Olivia began to notice things about Nathan: the thoughtful way he always made sure both women were served first at meals, how his serious expression would break into a rare but transformative smile at something Alina said. The gentle way he handled even the most fractious horses. He never raised his voice, never used his considerable physical strength to intimidate. In all ways, he was the opposite of the men who had dominated her life until now. One crisp October morning, nearly a month after her arrival, Nathan announced they needed to make a trip to Silver Peak for supplies before the first heavy snow. "You should come too," he told Olivia. "It'll do you good to get off the ranch for a day, and Alina mentioned you need some things of your own." The prospect filled Olivia with both excitement and dread. She hadn't left the safety of the ranch since arriving, and the thought of potentially encountering her stepfather made her stomach knot with anxiety. "What if Walter sees me?" she asked, unable to keep the fear from her voice. Nathan's expression hardened. "He won't bother you again. I promise you that." They set out the next morning in the wagon, the three of them wrapped in warm coats against the autumn chill. Olivia sat between Nathan and Alina on the bench, the gentle sway of the wagon and the rhythmic clop of the horses' hooves lulling her into a sense of security. Silver Peak appeared on the horizon after a few hours of travel, a collection of wooden buildings stretching along a single main street, with smaller residences scattered on the outskirts. Despite its modest size, the town bustled with activity. Miners from the surrounding hills mingled with ranchers and farmers, all preparing for the isolated months of winter ahead. "You and Alina go to the general store," Nathan said as he pulled the wagon to a stop in front of a two-story building with Silver Peak Mercantile painted across its facade. "I need to speak with the sheriff about some business. Then I'll join you." Inside the mercantile, Olivia felt overwhelmed by the sheer variety of goods. The shelves brimmed with everything from practical necessities to small luxuries, fabrics, tools, preserved foods, candies, and even a small selection of books. Alina guided her toward the section of ready-made clothing. "We should get you at least 2 dresses that are your own," she insisted, "and proper winter boots." Olivia protested the expense, but Alina was firm. "Nate said to get what you need, and he meant it. Trust me, my brother doesn't say things he doesn't mean." They were examining a bolt of warm blue flannel when the bell above the door jingled. Olivia looked up automatically, then froze. Walter Hargrove stood in the doorway, his roomy eyes scanning the store. When they landed on her, his face twisted with ugly recognition. "There you are, you ungrateful little. I'd think very carefully about your next words, Mr. Hargrove." Nathan had appeared behind Walter, his tall frame blocking the doorway. His voice was quiet, but carried an undercurrent of steel that made even the store owner look up from behind his counter. Walter's bloodshot eyes narrowed. "This ain't your business, Addison. The girl's my stepdaughter and she ran off." "After you sold her for a sack of flour," Nathan said, loud enough for everyone in the store to hear. A murmur went through the other customers. "Not sure that gives you any claim on her anymore." Walter's face flushed with rage and embarrassment. "That's a damn lie. The man you sold her to confirmed it when I spoke with Sheriff Davis just now." Nathan's voice remained calm, reasonable. "He also confirmed you've been trading illegal moonshine to the miners. The sheriff is quite interested in discussing that with you." The color drained from Walter's face. Illegal distilling carried heavy penalties in Montana territory, especially selling to the miners, where drunken accidents could be deadly. "You're bluffing," he sputtered, but his eyes darted nervously toward the door. "Miss Fairchild is 18 years old," Nathan continued, ignoring the interruption. "She's a free woman under the law, working for honest wages at my ranch. You have no claim on her, legal or otherwise. Now I suggest You leave before the sheriff arrives to ask you about that still behind your barn." For a moment, it seemed Walter might lunge at Nathan. His hands clenched into fists and his body tensed. But something in Nathan's steady gaze must have warned him off. With a final venomous glare at Olivia, he stormed out, nearly colliding with a couple entering the store. The tension in the mercantile broke. The store owner cleared his throat awkwardly and made a show of reorganizing items on his counter. The other customers gradually returned to their shopping, though Olivia could feel curious glances still being cast her way. She approached Nathan, her legs unsteady. "Thank you," she whispered. "But how did you know he'd be in town today?" "I didn't," Nathan admitted, "but I suspected he might be. It's why I wanted to speak with Sheriff Davis first to make sure your position was clear. You're free, Olivia. He can't touch you." The rest of their time in Silver Peak passed without incident, though Olivia remained shaken by the encounter. When they stopped at the small cafe for lunch before heading home, she finally gathered the courage to ask Nathan about what had happened with the sheriff. "Did you really report Walter for illegal distilling?" Nathan took a sip of his coffee before answering. "I didn't have to. The sheriff already knew. Turns out your stepfather has made quite a few enemies. I simply let Davis know you were under my protection now, and that any claims Walter might make about you running away would be false." "Your protection," Olivia repeated softly, turning the phrase over in her mind. It should have felt constricting, another man claiming authority over her life, but instead it brought warmth. Nathan's protection meant safety, not control. As they rode back to the ranch that afternoon, the wagon loaded with supplies, Olivia felt a curious lightness. For the first time since her mother's death, she wasn't looking over her shoulder, waiting for disaster to strike. She belonged somewhere, if only temporarily. And that somewhere was beginning to feel like home. Winter descended upon Silver Peak with a vengeance that year. The first snow came in early November, and by December, drifts piled against the sides of the ranch house, and the landscape transformed into an endless sea of white. The work changed, with the seasons no longer focused on harvests and preservation, but on maintaining the livestock through the harsh months and keeping the ranch buildings accessible. The forced closeness of winter brought Olivia and the Addisons even closer. Evenings stretched longer, filled with conversation, music from Alina's small piano, and occasional readings. Nathan proved surprisingly adept at carving, his large hands creating delicate figurines from scraps of wood as they sat before the fire. When he presented Olivia with a perfectly rendered little horse on Christmas morning, she couldn't hold back tears. "It's beautiful," she said, tracing the smooth lines of the carving. "I've never received such a thoughtful gift." "It's rusty," he explained, a hint of shyness in his expression. "The horse that brought you here." Olivia looked up at him, suddenly aware of how his blue eyes caught the firelight, how the usual sternness of his features had softened. "Thank you, Nathan, for everything." That evening, after Alina had gone to bed, Olivia found herself alone with Nathan by the dying fire. A comfortable silence stretched between them, broken only by the occasional pop of the embers. "Can I ask you something?" Olivia finally said. "Anything. Why did you help me that day?" "You could have ridden past, not gotten involved." Nathan considered the question seriously. "My father was like your stepfather," he said at last. "Cruel, saw women as property, children as burdens. When our mother died, things got bad, especially for Alina." His jaw tightened at the memory. "I promised myself that if I ever saw someone in that situation, I wouldn't look away." "What happened to him?" "Your father drank himself to death 3 winters ago," Nathan said without emotion. "By then, Alina and I had already built this place, started over." Olivia nodded, understanding better now why Alina had said they knew about family that didn't deserve the name. "I'm sorry you went through that. Don't be. It made me who I am." He looked at her directly. "Just like what you've endured has made you who you are, strong, resilient." "I don't feel strong," Olivia admitted. "You survived being treated as less than human. You rebuilt your life. That takes strength most men don't possess." His voice was low, intense. "When I found you on that road, you were worth more than any price someone could put on you." "More than gold, Olivia." Something shifted between them in that moment, a boundary crossed, a truth acknowledged. Olivia felt it like a physical change in the air, the crackle of possibility. Nathan stood abruptly. "It's late. We should get some rest." Though nothing more was said about that conversation, Olivia sensed a new awareness in their interactions. Nathan's gaze lingered longer when he thought she wasn't looking. His hand brushed hers when passing dishes at dinner. Small moments of connection that sent her heart racing in a way that had nothing to do with fear. As January gave way to February, Olivia realized with surprise that she'd been at the Addison ranch for over 4 months. What had begun as temporary shelter had evolved into something that felt permanent. She no longer thought of leaving, and neither Nathan nor Alina had suggested it. She belonged here now, as surely as if she'd always been part of their family. But what was her place, exactly? A hired hand? A friend? Something more, at least where Nathan was concerned. The question consumed her thoughts as she went about her daily tasks, distracting her enough that Alina finally commented on it one afternoon as they kneaded bread dough together. "You're 1,000 miles away today," Alina observed, nudging Olivia's shoulder gently. "Thinking about my brother, perhaps?" Olivia's hand stilled in the dough, her cheeks flushing. "Is it that obvious?" Alina laughed. "Only to someone who knows you both well. And Nate's just as bad, though he thinks he hides it better." "I don't know what to do," Olivia confessed. There's never been anyone who treated you with basic human decency," Alina finished for her. "I understand. After our father, it took me a long time to trust any man except Nate. But not all men are like that, Olivia. Some are worth risking your heart for." "But what if I'm misreading things? What if he just sees me as someone to protect, like you?" Alina shook her head, smiling. "Trust me, the way he looks at you is nothing like how he looks at his sister." She dusted flour from her hands. "Nate's not good with words when it comes to feelings. He might need some encouragement." The opportunity came sooner than Olivia expected. The following day, a sudden thaw turned the snow to slush, making the path to the barn treacherously slippery. Alina had gone to bed early with a headache, leaving Olivia to wash the dinner dishes alone. Through the window, she saw Nathan struggling to carry hay bales from the storage shed to the barn, his boots sliding on the icy ground. Without thinking, she grabbed her shawl and hurried outside to help. The cold air bit at her cheeks as she carefully picked her way across the yard. "Let me help," she called as she approached. Nathan turned, surprised. "It's freezing out here. You should be inside." "So should you, but the animals need feeding regardless of the weather." She reached for one end of the hay bale he was carrying. "This will go faster with 2 of us." Together, they managed to transfer the remaining hay to the barn. Inside, the air was warmer, filled with the comforting smells of livestock and hay. The horses nickered softly in greeting, and the milk cows shifted in their stalls. "Thank you," Nathan said as they distributed the last of the hay. "You didn't have to come out in the cold. I wanted to." Olivia brushed stray pieces of hay from her skirt. "Besides, this ranch is my home too now." Nathan stilled, his eyes finding hers in the lantern light. "Is that how you feel? That this is your home?" "Yes," she said simply. If that's all right." "It's more than all right." He took a step closer. I've been wanting to talk to you about that, actually, about your future here. Olivia's heart hammered in her chest. My future. I know you came here out of necessity, that you didn't have a choice that day. His voice was low, uncertain in a way she'd never heard before. But I hope that if you had a choice now, if you could go anywhere, do anything, you'd still choose to stay. I would, she whispered. I can't imagine being anywhere else. Nathan took another step toward her, close enough now that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. When I found you that day, I told myself I was just doing what any decent man would do. But it was more than that. His hand reached up hesitantly to brush a strand of hair from her face. I think part of me knew even then. Knew what? Olivia barely dared to breathe. That you were meant to be here, with me. His palm cupped her cheek, gentle as a whisper. I'm not good with words, Olivia, but I need you to know that you're not just someone I helped. You're not an obligation or a responsibility. You're everything. The last word broke something open inside her, a dam holding back feelings she'd been too afraid to acknowledge. Tears welled in her eyes, but they were tears of a different kind than those she'd shed before. I was afraid, she admitted, afraid that you only saw me as someone to protect, someone broken. I see you, Olivia Fairchild. His voice was fierce with conviction. I see your strength, your kindness, your heart. I see a woman worth more than gold to me. When he finally kissed her, it was with such tenderness that Olivia felt herself melting against him, her arms winding around his neck. This wasn't the rough handling she'd feared from men before. This was a communion, an offering. She kissed him back with all the emotion she'd kept carefully contained, feeling as though something long dormant inside her had finally awakened. When they broke apart, both breathless, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. I love you, he said simply. I think I have since that first day. I love you too, she replied, the words feeling both new and familiar on her tongue. They returned to the house hand in hand, the cold forgotten in the warmth of their newfound understanding. In the kitchen, Nathan kissed her once more before they parted for the night, a promise in his eyes that made her heart soar. The next morning, Elena took one look at them across the breakfast table and broke into a radiant smile. Well, it's about time, she declared, making both of them blush. Over the weeks that followed, love blossomed between Nathan and Olivia, like the first flowers pushing through the last of the winter snow. Each day brought new discoveries, the way Nathan hummed under his breath when content, how he always saved the last bite of dessert for her, the surprising gentleness of his calloused hands. For his part, Nathan seemed equally enchanted by Olivia's quiet strength, her determined optimism, the way she'd transformed his house into a genuine home. As March brought the first real hints of spring, Nathan took Olivia on a ride to a hill overlooking the ranch. The snow had receded enough to reveal patches of earth, and tiny green shoots were beginning to emerge from the soil. I wanted to show you something, he said, helping her down from her horse. They'd reached a spot where a large, flat boulder provided a perfect view of the valley below. This is where I decided to build the ranch, 5 years ago. I stood on this rock and promised myself I'd create something good here, something my father could never touch. Olivia took in the vista. The ranch buildings nestled in the protective embrace of the surrounding hills, the creek winding through the property, the pastures where cattle would soon graze again. You did create something good, Nathan, something beautiful. It wasn't complete until you came. He turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. Olivia, I know we haven't known each other long by some standards, but I feel like my whole life was leading me to that road, to that moment when I found you. Her breath caught as he lowered himself to one knee, still holding her hands. I don't have much to offer except this ranch, my name, and every beat of my heart for as long as I live." His blue eyes shone with emotion. "Olivia Fairchild, will you marry me?" "Yes," she answered without hesitation, joy bubbling up inside her like a spring. "Yes, Nathan, I will." He slipped a ring onto her finger, a simple band of gold with a small pearl set in its center. "It was my mother's," he explained. "Eleanor kept it safe all these years. She insisted you should have it." "It's perfect," Olivia whispered, tears blurring her vision as she pulled him to his feet and into her arms. They were married in April, when the world was fresh and new. The ceremony took place at the ranch, performed by the traveling preacher who visited Silver Peak every few months. The guest list was small, just Eleanor, Sheriff Davis and his wife, a few neighboring ranchers who'd become friends, and surprisingly, Mrs. Sullivan from the boarding house in town, who'd taken a keen interest in Olivia's story. Olivia wore a dress of pale blue, sewn by Eleanor's skilled hands. Nathan, usually seen in work clothes, had donned his one good suit, looking so handsome it made Olivia's heart skip when she first saw him waiting for her. "Dearly beloved," the preacher began, his voice carrying across the spring air, "we are gathered here today to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony." As they spoke their vows, Olivia thought of the journey that had brought her here, the pain and desperation that had led to that terrible day when her stepfather had valued her at nothing more than a sack of flour. How could she have known then that his cruelty would lead her to this moment, to this man, to this life full of love? "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the preacher declared. "You may kiss the bride." Nathan's kiss was gentle but full of promise. When they turned to face their small gathering of guests, Olivia felt a sense of rightness settle deep in her bones. This was where she belonged. This was home. Life as Mrs. Addison was everything Olivia had never dared to dream of. The work was still hard, ranch life demanded no less, but it was work shared, purpose aligned. She and Nathan moved together like dancers in a familiar routine, each anticipating the other's needs, supporting each other's strengths. Eleanor, far from feeling like an outsider in the newlyweds' home, blossomed in her role as sister to them both. "I've never seen Nate so happy," she confided to Olivia one afternoon as they worked together in the vegetable garden. "You've brought something to this ranch that was missing before." Summer came, bringing long days of sunshine and growth. The cattle grew fat on the lush grass, the garden yielded a bounty of vegetables, and the ranch prospered under their combined care. In July, they hosted a small gathering for Independence Day, with neighbors traveling from miles around to share food and conversation. Olivia, once so shy and withdrawn, found herself enjoying the role of hostess, her confidence growing with each passing day. "Mrs. Addison," Sheriff Davis said as she refilled his coffee cup, "I hardly recognized you from the scared young woman I met this winter. Marriage certainly agrees with you." "It's not just marriage," Olivia replied with a smile. "It's finding where you belong." As autumn approached once more, bringing the anniversary of her arrival at the ranch, Olivia began to suspect a new blessing was on its way. Her monthly courses had stopped, and certain smells that had never bothered her before now turned her stomach. She kept the suspicion to herself, wanting to be certain before sharing the news with Nathan. The confirmation came from Eleanor, who noticed Olivia's pallor one morning at breakfast. "Are you feeling unwell?" she asked, concern etching her features. "Just a little queasy," Olivia admitted. "It passes by midday." A knowing look crossed Eleanor's face. "How long has this been happening?" "About 2 weeks." Eleanor's expression softened. "And when was your last monthly?" The directness of the question startled Olivia, but the warmth in Eleanor's eyes eased any embarrassment. "Nearly 8 weeks ago." Oh, Olivia, Eleanor's face broke into a radiant smile. Have you told Nate yet? Not yet. I wanted to be sure. My mother had the same morning sickness with both of us, Eleanor said gently. I'd say you can be fairly certain. That evening, after Eleanor had tactfully made an excuse to visit a friend in town, Olivia prepared Nathan's favorite meal, beef stew with dumplings and apple pie for dessert. She'd worn her best dress, a deep green that brought out the auburn highlights in her hair, and set the table with care. Nathan noticed the special preparations as soon as he came in from the barn. "What's the occasion?" he asked, kissing her cheek. "Do I need an occasion to make my husband's favorite meal?" He studied her face, a smile playing at his lips. "No, but you've got that look that says you're keeping a secret." After dinner, as they sat together on the porch swing watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and purple, Olivia gathered her courage. "You remember when you found me on the road last year?" she asked. Nathan's arm tightened around her shoulders. "I'm not likely to forget the day that changed my life. You told me later that I was worth more than gold to you. And you are," he said simply. "More than anything." Olivia took his hand and placed it gently over her still flat stomach. "Even more than you knew, Nathan, we're going to have a baby." For a moment he sat perfectly still, his expression unreadable. Then, with a sound that was half laugh, half sob, he gathered her into his arms. "A baby," he whispered against her hair. "Our baby." The joy in his voice washed away any lingering doubts she might have had. This child would be born into love, into a family that valued each member as precious beyond measure. "Are you happy?" she asked, though his reaction had made the answer obvious. Happy doesn't begin to cover it. He drew back to look at her, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "You've given me everything, Olivia. A home that's truly a home. Your love. And now a child. I don't know what I did to deserve this life, but I promise I'll spend every day trying to be worthy of it." "You already are," she said, resting her head against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "You saw value in me when everyone else saw something to be traded away. You showed me what love really means." As twilight deepened around them, Olivia thought of the journey that had brought her here from a frightened girl with nothing to her name but a bundle of meager possessions, to a woman surrounded by love, creating a family of her own. All because one man had looked at her and seen not what she could provide, but who she truly was. The baby was born the following spring, a healthy boy they named Thomas, after Nathan's grandfather. He had his father's blue eyes and his mother's determined spirit, and from his first cry, he was adored not only by his parents, but by his Aunt Eleanor, who took to the role of doting aunt with enthusiasm. The Addison ranch grew along with their family. With careful management and hard work, Nathan was able to purchase the adjacent property when it came up for sale, doubling their acreage. They added 2 hired hands to help with the expanded operation, built a larger barn, and even opened a small smithy where Nathan could pursue his newfound talent for ironwork during the winter months. 3 years after Thomas's birth, a daughter joined the family, Sarah Eleanor, named for both Olivia's mother and Nathan's sister. With her arrival, their cup of happiness seemed to overflow. The ranch house, once so quiet, now echoed with children's laughter and the constant bustle of family life. News came occasionally from Silver Peak about Walter Hargrove. He had indeed been charged with illegal distilling, though he'd avoided jail time by paying a substantial fine. The loss of his still had driven him deeper into debt and drink. The last Olivia heard, he'd sold what remained of the homestead and headed west, chasing rumors of gold in California. "You ever think about him?" Nathan asked one night as they lay together, the children asleep down the hall. Olivia considered the question. "Less and less," she admitted. It's strange he dominated my life for so long, but now he seems like a character from someone else's story." "Good," Nathan said, drawing her closer. "He doesn't deserve space in your thoughts. In a way, I should thank him," Olivia mused. "If he hadn't traded me that day, I might never have found you." Nathan's expression darkened. "Don't give him credit for what was his greatest cruelty. We would have found each other somehow. I believe that. Perhaps he was right. Perhaps in any version of their lives, any twist of fate, they would have eventually found their way to each other." Olivia liked to think so, that some souls were simply meant to connect, no matter what obstacles stood between them. On the 10th anniversary of the day Nathan had rescued her from Thorne's wagon, they returned to the hill overlooking the ranch. The view had changed. New buildings dotted the landscape. Herds of cattle grazed in pastures that had once been wild. An orchard of young apple trees lined the drive. Below them, Alina supervised Thomas and Sarah as they played in the yard, their childish shouts carrying faintly on the breeze. "Could you have imagined this?" Olivia asked, leaning back against Nathan's chest as his arms encircled her waist. "That day on the road, could you have pictured what our life would become?" "No," he admitted, his breath warm against her ear. "I just knew I couldn't leave you there. Everything after that was a gift I never expected." Olivia turned in his arms to face him. A decade had added a few lines around his eyes, a touch of silver at his temples, but he was still the same man who had looked at a frightened girl traded for flour and declared her worth more than gold. "You saved me," she said simply. Nathan shook his head. "We saved each other." As they made their way back down the hill to their waiting family, Olivia reflected on the strange alchemy of life, how the darkest moments could lead to the brightest futures, how value could be found in the most unexpected places. She had been traded away like an object of little worth, only to discover that her true value lay not in what someone would pay for her, but in her capacity to love and be loved in return. And that, she now knew, was a treasure beyond price.